Shabbat Shalom. The Torah says, Lo tov hayot adam levado, it is not good for a person to be alone. For millennia, the way in which, and by the way, when the Torah says it's not good for a person to be alone, the word good there does not mean a moral declaration. It means a person is not complete when they are alone. God says, God created light and said it was good, morally good, yes, but it was complete. It was done for millennia, the way in which societies defined not being alone was through heterosexual marriage. That is not the only way that one is not alone. And it is a great blessing that our tradition and our society has grown and evolved and changed and recognized that people find love in many ways, that people find love in relationships with a life partner, and also that people who are single find not aloneness in community and with each other, and that is a great blessing. I also just want to say, I mentioned not just living in the present moment. It was about 24 hours ago in this very place that Pearl Levine's body lay before us. And Pearl was a superhero of love. And she understood long before her time how important it was to accept and to love not only her own son, but so many people whose own parents could not give them that very same gift. And so as we celebrate not only our high school seniors, that we will do after Musaf, after the Kaddish Shalem and before Aleinu, we have some special blessings for them. But as we celebrate Pride Shabbat as well, I am pleased to welcome Whitney Barkley Denney to give a special Devar Torah presentation for Pride Shabbat. She and her husband David and their children Ezra and Zara moved here from Mississippi and joined the Bethel community last year, and she is studying with me for conversion. And today she will speak on the hate crime at Little River and the birth of Durham Pride, exploring how a tragic event sparked North Carolina's very first Pride and helped shape Durham's progressive future. And as we hear this story, I just remind us that as we enter places that celebrate Pride, we should always do so with a sense of pride in our Jewish identity, never erase ourselves, and celebrate with a full heart with those who see us for who we are. Whitney.
Hey, thank you so much, Rabbi. As the Rabbi said, my name is Whitney Barkley Denney, and I'm a relatively new member of Bethel, though not new to Judaism. My husband brought me to Judaism in Mississippi about 11 years ago. There's one synagogue in the whole state, so you can imagine my introduction there. I am a native North Carolinian, though, and I have to ask, how many people here were in Durham in 1981 and 1986? So you guys probably remember what I'm going to be talking about, right? Unfortunately, though, I think it has somewhat faded from the collective consciousness, and that is what we are trying to fix this year. So this year marks the 41st and 45th anniversaries the 40th and 45th anniversaries of what happened at Little River, and then what that became as far as a decision for the type of city that Durham was going to be. And these were watershed moments for the LGBTQIA community here in Durham, and it began with the murder of a man named Ronald Antonovich at Little River. And the subsequent march that came from that, which was called Our Day Out, led to the city's inaugural Pride Parade in 1986 and the attempted recall of Mayor Webb Goley after he signed an anti-discrimination proclamation. I've actually brought copies of the proclamation. I did not think there would be this many people here, so I put them out. First come, first serve. But you can also get one at the City of Durham Museum, which is doing a great exhibit on these 2 summers and what happened here. So these are kind of cool, though. They're like little postcards with the actual proclamation on them. So over the last year, I've been working to secure a historic marker memorializing these events. That marker is probably going to be placed in October. We've had a few delays now. And I will tell you that this is not a super easy process. I didn't know what it was going to be like when I went out to get one, but you actually do have to prove what you're saying. You're not just allowed to write the state and say, I'd like a memorial for my house because I'm awesome. You actually do have to show through secondary and primary documentation that what you are asking for is both true and historically significant. And this really made me think about memory and the way that we remember things. You know, we don't know necessarily that we are living in a historic moment when we are living in it. And so it's sort of up to us to make sure that we are safeguarding and safekeeping those memories for everyone. As Carl Whitman, who was a protest participant in 1981 after the events at Little River said, "We don't just want to let this incident at Little River pass. It's a question of the whole atmosphere that would let something like this happen." So what did happen, and who was at the center of it? At the center of what happened in Little River was a man named Ronald Antonovich. He was called Sonny by his friends and family. We don't know a ton about Sonny Antonovich. Most of what I'm going to tell you came from his wife's self-published book on raising a disabled child. She tells us that Sonny went into Massachusetts foster care almost immediately after he was born to a single mother in 1935. He experienced severe abuse and neglect in the foster care system. When he was in his early teens, though, his mother married and was allowed to try to take him back. Unfortunately, before that happened, his stepfather died in an automobile accident, and as a single woman, she was no longer allowed to get her child out of foster care, so he stayed there until he aged out at 18. When he was 19, he came to Mebane, North Carolina, where he got involved in the local disability and mental health community. He met his wife, Patricia, here. They were older than usual, bride and grooms for that time period. And Patricia herself had a learning disability and had suffered much of the same ostracization that Sonny had experienced. She had a speech disorder, and so she couldn't really speak very clearly a lot of places where she was. They had a son, VJ, who was born severely disabled. But they were devoted parents, and as I said, we know this about Sonny because his wife actually ended up writing an autobiography that she self-published on how to advocate for your child in the disability systems in North Carolina. So she was no shrinking violet herself. VJ was a toddler when his father died. According to Patricia, Ronald did everything he could to be kind and gentle and never abusive because of what he had suffered in his own childhood. On April 12, 1981, Ronald went to sunbathe on the rocks of Little River in North Durham, almost in Bahama. If you're familiar with that area, the entrance to the swimming hole at that time was around Patrick Road, but the river has changed since they dammed it in 1986, so you can't find the same place now. On that day, he was 45 and recovering from open heart surgery. I've actually had the same surgery twice. Ronald, like me, had a faulty valve. And so I know what it's like. My husband was with me for one of them, what it's like in those first 6 or 7 weeks when you can't really do anything and you're so isolated in your house. I know what it's like to just want to be out around people. And I'm guessing that's what Ronald wanted those days. So the area he went to sunbathe was known as a gay watering hole, although we don't have any evidence that Ronald himself was a gay man. It was probably just easily accessible for him at that time. On that day, 2 men approached the swimming hole, and they fashioned clubs out of tree limbs and began beating the people who were at the swimming hole. 4 people, including Antonovich, were severely injured. The other 3 recovered. Ronald Antonovich did not. There is one living witness from that day, Michael Penny. He said that Ronald was practically helpless due to his recent surgery, and that his head was held underwater by his assailants, and he died from swelling in his brain. That witness, as I said, Michael Penny, went on to become a luminary of Durham's gay community and owned several nightclubs downtown. And I say that just because I want to say he's still here, and he's not defined by what happened here. He is defined by everything else he did for the community in the 80s and 90s and still today. So in response to this hate crime, 125 men, women, and children held vigil outside the Durham County Courthouse, demanding justice for Ronald. And 2 months later, 300 people marched in what was called Our Day Out. It was the first demonstration of LGBTQIA solidarity and allyship in North Carolina, and it was only the second in the South. We had only seen this happen in Atlanta before. Now, the historians that I read and talked to for this, they are quick to point out that this was not really a pride march. People actually covered their heads with bags because they didn't want anyone to know who they were. And one of the people who signed this petition for the first pride was signed at M.E. That was Meredith Emmett, who is now an extremely active Durhamite. But even during that time, as she will say, she was not fully out, so she was going by her initials. But it did put Durham at a crossroads. Who are we going to be as a community, and how are we going to treat our queer neighbors, our Black and brown neighbors? We were really coming out, as I understand it, from the post-tobacco Durham and trying to figuring out what this new Durham was going to look like. So Antonivich's murderers, they were eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison. But that didn't end the story. Michael Penny, when he was interviewed about this, said, after it was reported in the newspaper, there was a great deal of empathy. And you can be very proud of the way Durham responded. Liberal Durham came through. The movement for liberation only grew from there. So in 1986, 5 years later, a group of lesbian women, including Mab Segrist and Meredith Emmett, organized the first Pride Month in Durham. And as part of the celebrations, they went to the newly elected mayor, Wib Gully, and asked him to sign this proclamation declaring that the week of Pride was to be an anti-discrimination week citywide. And I just want to read this to you because I think it's so powerful that this was written in 1986. Whereas all people have the right to love and live free from bigotry, violence, and fear, in the workplace, the family, the streets of our city, our places of worship and play, our hospitals, our clinics, our schools, and the privacy of our homes, now therefore, I, Wilbur P. Gully, Mayor of the City of Durham, do hereby proclaim the week of June 22nd to 29th, 1986, as Anti-Discrimination Week. And this got Mayor Gully into a lot of trouble, as you might remember. There was an attempt over that summer led by Durham's conservative churches to recall the mayor. This attempt never made it to the ballot, mostly because of the organizing of places like Bethel. I'm sure everybody here will be happy to know that Bethel was indeed, in Durham's Jewish community widely, on the right side of history in this. Bethel was a major part of it. The Durham County Library's LGBTQ collection includes an anti-recall petition circulated by Bethel to members, a speech given at Judea Reform in support of Mayor Gully, and the JCRC's resolution in support of the mayor. Pride went on, the anti-discrimination ordinance or the anti-discrimination proclamation remained in place, and so did Mayor Gully. So since then, Pride has continued not only in Durham, but in cities across North Carolina. You can go see all of this at the Durham Museum of History. There's an excellent exhibit there on 1981 and 1986, and it's running through October. There's also going to be events across the city celebrating Durham's progress and resilience and remembering what happened at Little River. The Durham County Library, the LGBTQ Center, and the Museum of Durham will all be participating. And the memorial marker should go up in October, right in time for the 40th Pride March in the city. It's going to be right near, it has to be on state property, so it's going to be right near the Durham Museum of History. And it will read, First LGBTQ Pride March in North Carolina, June 27th, 1981, advocated for rights and visibility, sparked by the deadly assault at Little River, 10 miles north. And I would just say, we obviously have come such a far way. I will say in my talks with the state, two things. One, that is the great thing is that this will be the first marker in North Carolina to say the words LGBTQ on it. Even Polly Murray's marker does not say LGBTQ on it. On the other side, we did decide that we wanted to put it downtown because we were concerned if we put it out in the country near where this happened in Little River, that it would be vandalized. So it's just a reminder that, we still have to have these considerations today as we go forward in the world. And I want to make one final note, and I wish this was an uplifting one, but maybe it is. Maybe we can do something about this together. Ronald Antonivich's son died at 27 in the early 2000s, but his wife lived until 2019 in Carver and Chapel Hill. And I don't know, I've never read anything that she talked about her husband's death and how it changed Durham for the better. But I will say the family is buried in an unmarked grave in Alamance County. There's no marker on their graves. So this is the only way that we can kind of remember them, is telling their story and saying that we will never return to a time like what was faced in 1981. So thank you.